CNN will soon be airing a powerful new documentary entitled Crisis: America Not in Crisis. The documentary will detail the crisis hitting America's newsrooms as all across this nation, from 8th Avenue in Manhattan all the way to H Street in Washington, D.C., journalists are realizing that the racial tensions tearing this country apart exist largely from 8th Avenue in Manhattan all the way to H Street in Washington, D.C. The crisis was sparked after shocking videos of life outside a narrow corridor of land near the East Coast somehow found their way into American newsrooms. These videos, largely taken during Hurricane Harvey in Texas, showed amazing scenes of yucky, ordinary Americans treating each other with civility, kindness, and respect, even as America's journalists were slavering with sneering hatred for them because they're different than America's slavering, hate-filled journalists. In one amazing rescue involving helicopters, small watercraft, and police dogs, CNN's Chris Cuomo was airlifted out of an ideological bubble in which he'd been trapped for 47 years. In the wake of the rescue, Cuomo witnessed scenes of Texans he absolutely despised doing nicer things for one another than he'd ever done for anyone. Cuomo then gave an interview to his own hand in which he said, quote, "Oh, my dear hand, to whom I've been talking almost exclusively for as long as I can remember, it now seems I've been reporting on seething racism in an America that exists almost entirely inside my own imagination. Oh, please, my beloved hand, send me back to that imaginary America forever, lest I have to change my mind about anything or admit to myself that the ordinary Americans I hate are actually better people than I am," unquote. In another crisis scene at the offices of the New York Times, a former newspaper, emergency workers labored overtime to shore up the minds of journalists lest they perceive that they've been covering a small number of black activist conmen playing off an even smaller number of white supremacist losers in order to instigate localized riots and protests that create the illusion that a generally friendly and prosperous America is coming apart at the seams. In a statement released to the Hamptons, New York Times editor Blithering Prevarication III announced, quote, "It would be a crisis of unprecedented proportions if our readers should ever suspect that the poverty, high crime, and anger in many inner-city neighborhoods are not the result of American racism, but of the poor social policies and race-mongering lies we've been promoting for 60 years," unquote. As the crisis of non-crisis deepens, many journalists are beginning to fear that Americans may soon discover that more than half of the angry white men they say voted for Donald Trump were not men or not white, meaning the country looks nothing like they say it does. As Clinton's surrogate George Stephanopoulos said in an interview with ABC's top journalist George Stephanopoulos, quote, "We must build stronger levees and sturdier infrastructure to keep America's newsrooms from being flooded by reality," unquote. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.